So what's up, guys? We are welcome to 2025. This will be our first podcast of the year. I'm with my brother, Mr. Herschel.
I'm going to break a rule. I'm going to break the Larry David rule and say Happy New Year more than a week after New Year's.
There is a rule. I think
not
it's the
supposed to do
7th,
it.
right? After the 7th?
It's after the 7th. You're not supposed to say it, but it's our first podcast back. So Happy New Year to you guys and Happy New Year to my brother here. So.
We were already arguing and laughing before this.
We were.
So I feel like we've already started this.
Yeah, there's a little bit of conflict here. You'll see it's going to play out.
It's going to play out good.
Yeah.
So today, I think, and again, all of our incredible clients and friends from around the world are always asking us what we think, what we see in the market. I think it's very cool because I think our ear is always in the pulse of the market based on phone calls, social media messages, constantly talking. A big part of our business, we're on the phone all day long talking to collectors and clients and other, people from other dealerships and things like that. So I do actually think we have a good finger on the pulse.
Yeah, look, I think part of our responsibility is not really to be salesmen, not in this segment of the market. It's really to be advisors.
Yes.
Because ultimately we stay in the life cycle of the car. We buy a lot of these vehicles back.
Yes.
So we have a responsibility to advise, and based on that advisement, we have a responsibility to do proper due diligence, see what market trends are. This way, when the client makes a purchase, there's a confidence in what the value of that vehicle is going to be later. So yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to jump into it today. What's hot? What's not of 2025? What do you see in the collector car world, in the cars that we're dealing? And I would say not just the cars that we're dealing, but I would say anything from maybe 50,000 up to 50 million. What are you most excited about, or what do you foresee as something that you see as a sector of growth in 2025?
So I started really looking at this early in 24, and 24 was like an odd year, being an election year, and not to get into politics, we won't do that, but I think September, October, there was like this recoil of confidence. No one knew the direction we were going in.
Yeah.
And now, again, not making a political statement, but there seems to be a lot more confidence in the market. We're seeing a ramp up. But what I started to see was, as things started to tighten up, there was a more like directed approach to what are people looking at. And I always started to look at the provenance-based race car segment, which would be Formula One cars that ran notable races, cars that ran in series, everything from Formula One down to some minor series. And I think when you're looking at that type of purchasing, collecting, you're looking at purchasing cars that maybe there's 1, 2 in the world. So I think that segment is going to get really hot in 25.
I have to disagree with you. And part of that, I will say we have a pending sale on a car right now that I gush over. I'm absolutely in love with. It's going to a major a collector who I respect his opinion. And he sent me this really beautiful message. He's like, thank you for getting something that's a dream for me. I remember seeing it as a young guy in magazines, posters, things like that. And it's the Callaway Speedster. It's a car we sold a few years ago. It has zero provenance in terms of racing. I mean, Reeves Callaway he actually ran at a serious level. He ran Le Mans and different things like that. But the Speedster itself, I mean, this is pure excessiveness, early 1990s. This was the BF Goodrich poster car. It was on a ton of magazines, things like that. They made toy models of it. I had the models, all the scales. And you wouldn't believe how many people have reached out to us about this car. We have a list of clients that have called us and are just enamored by this car. So I really believe that there is a generation of icons like this that don't have the racing provenance. Again, there's one of 12. I think there's 10 and then 2 super speedsters, but there's one of 10 Callaway Speedsters. So these special pieces, I had someone else call me that you have to find the Callaway Sledgehammer, which was, I think, 270 mile per hour tuner car. So I really think these cars, and I'm not going to put them all into tuner car category, but these cars that shocked the world, changed the world, that made statements, things like roof examples, the Yellowbird. We've had a lot of excitement around those cars. I think cars like that, I see the future going there.
So look, it's hard to disagree, especially on the Callaway, because I remember when I was younger, and you were a kid. I remember looking at that car, and I was like, maybe early on in my car craziness days, and I was like, man, that car is insane. And it just made you feel a certain way. And somebody did more than wheels and tires, because that was kind of the tuner world back then.
Yes.
Wings, wheels, and tires, and they come out with this insane, it just looks like a new car. I think as a segment is concerned, I do like the tuner segment. I think Roof rises above that, more into a manufacturer-ish thing, right? You could argue with that, these other companies like Singer and Gunther have kind of taken their cue off of what Roof has been doing for a long time. But I still think if you're looking from the collectability aspect, Provenance-based race cars offer a little bit more upside value because the asset is rarer. If you buy a Michael Schumacher car that won a bunch of races, it's the one. You have the one, right? Or the one of two. Whereas the tuner segment for 25, I think it's going to get hot, but I think it's going to stay really focused. Callaway would be this outlier brand, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so cool.
Yes.
They were doing something really different, kind of outside the box with the Speedster. But overall, as if you look at the entire tuner market, you really could break it down to 2 legacy or 3 legacy. There was Gimbala that kind of did some cool stuff. Callaway with their Speedster, and I think Roof.
I've been dying to, and I've been looking for them. Were I don't know if you remember the Hennessy Venom cars. So the Viper Venom cars. There's a few famous cars. There was one on the cover of Motor Trend. I think it was the fastest car they ever tested. Hennessy had a lot of drama during that time, especially on the forums.
Yeah.
And then talk about an American dream story of like sort of rebirthing his brand and image and his company, and now is building legitimate hypercars that are selling for multi-millions.
It's interesting because I think that's where that segment in 25 is going to fall away. I think in 2023 you had a lot of this money filtering through from like the COVID money, and there was a lot of hyper spending.
Yep. And
I think money would go into that world because it was being spent everywhere.
Yeah.
I feel like domestic tuners here, like Celine's, when they were doing the S7 and Hennessy's, I think from a collectability standpoint, you're not going to see the same type of oxygen or bandwidth applied to those as you will a legacy tuner like Roof. There's still a mystique with a Roof or Gimbala in that tuner world that I don't think the domestic tuners have really kind of captured yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's, listen, I disagree with you partially because I feel like the one thing about the tuners through video games and magazines, they reached a mass market. Yeah. Really a wide market. We'll see. I think I agree with you that especially now, I think the cream is rising to the top. Pedigree is everything. Provenance is everything. Really, really special cars. It's funny. We just bought a car and we're chasing a few cars that I just opened my eyes to, and I'm sort of really excited about. And I would say this sort of generation of cars as well is both Ferrari 599 SE Aperta, which I've never pursued them. And it was actually one of our clients that was like, hey, go find me one. And then as I did research and realized there's only 80 in the world, it's basically a 599 GTO with no roof. I've fallen in love. I think they're super cool.
Well, look, the spec that we got was just, you couldn't spec it better. 599. And listen, you're speaking my language, right?
I know you love those cars. That's why now I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, Ferrari, numbered edition, only 80 cars. And I was kind of shocked at how long it took for the market to recognize that car. And you're starting to see that market move pretty quickly. I think we're just getting into it, but I think that market's a move.
Yes.
If you look at the car behind us, the 599 GTO, another car which I just couldn't understand for a couple of years, kind of languished. There's so many things about the GTO that make it special and fun and collectible and iconic.
Yes.
And now that market's really starting to move.
Yes.
So yeah, we're going to really agree on this one. I think as we move forward, same thing for Lamborghini, Diablo GTs. Obviously, one of my personal favorite cars. I think yours as well. 80 cars.
Yes.
Just sat around for a long time. No one paid attention. So the buyer, collector, investor they're becoming much more educated.
Yes.
They're understanding, they're buying with passion. I love this car, but hey, what version of the car I love? Which one's numbered? What do they make the least of?
Yeah.
What has provenance?
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting? I think Doug DeMuro brought up the other day, he talked about a golden era of cars and that mid 2000s, you could call it 99 to 2009 as this golden era, usable cars, fast cars. He brought up an interesting point that once the double clutch came in and people were going to, e-gears and these paddle shifts with a double clutch, it's sort of, the cars sort of lost their, dynamic and their sensory experience. I actually agree. I'm in love. I know you love the TDF. I'm not a TDF guy. I'm not a TDF fan. I know you do. I think the GTO is the car. I mean, you drive a GTO. It's so visceral. I love the way it shifts. I love how it just shifts hard.
So as you know, a few years ago, remember, we had the GTO, and I was lucky enough to take it up to Monterey and drive it around all week. And I do love the car. It's hard to compare the two, but then we had a chance to spend some time with a TDF. I think we had the car for a couple of months and driving it around. And there's a visceralness to that car that I don't think they're ever going to capture again. I think that was the last kind of brute visceral that they put in the car. And that car was, to me, I call it was an Italian hot rod.
Yeah.
So I love the TDF. I love the looks of the TDF. Yep. I think it's bold. I think it's kind of daring with the vents in the back. And I just feel like it's so Italian.
Yeah.
Whereas the 590 GTO was this iteration. It's kind of the 599 and just has a black tie on now, right? It's a little bit more subtle than the TDF was, more hammer in your face.
Yep.
I think it has a lot of big shoes to fill with the GTO nameplate on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love both. It's hard to knock either one of those cars.
You know what's one car that surprises me, and this is, do not take my financial advice on this one. I just think I recently watched the old Top Gear episode with the SLR. And McLaren SLRs have been languishing forever around, let's call it 250,000. It feels like to 350,000. Obviously, unless it's a special edition. But there's not even that. They didn't actually make that many cars, one. Two, they didn't sell very well when they were new. But when you watch Jeremy Clarkson talk about the car and push it very hard around a racetrack, I forgot how good of a car it was, how fast it was, how interesting it was. He basically called it the perfect car. Did everything right. He actually said it was better than the McLaren F1. And it's funny because these cars struggle. And looking at them, I mean, their presence is incredible. The build quality is incredible. I know the service costs can be expensive. Numerous people have talked about the service costs. But man, I think these cars are so cool. Years ago, people would say, things like, it's not a manual and things like that, but nothing's a manual now. So
I think it's the problem with that car is it's hiding in the shadow of the SLS Black Series.
Yep.
The SLS Black Series, going car.
Yep.
Better performer, better looking. I think less of them made, right? 350 cars made.
Yeah.
186 US cars. And then if you compare the two driving style wise, I just know the times I've spent in an SLR, and granted I've never taken on a track or pushed it, it just feels like big and trucky and heavy to me. And,
steering's heavy.
Versus the SLS Black Series, which is kind of refined and it's fast and it's...
But you know what? When you think of it, listen, the SLS Black Series, you go back in time and it was Ferrari Enzo, Carrera GT, SLR McLaren. Those were the three cars. Fast forward, it was... Ferrari 918, McLaren P1. Holy Trinity?
It was a Trinity, yeah.
Trinity, Holy Trinity. So I do think historically it's an important car. I actually think it looks better than the SLS Black Series.
I
an SLR?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I think the goofy animated long front hood. Yeah. I've never really loved. I thought it was cool when it came out, and like I said, it had a lot to make up for in the looks. I thought, this car drives amazing, and I just didn't feel it with the S.
Man, I don't know. I maybe there could be a McLaren SLR in my future. I think it's very cool. I love it. I think it's super cool. You know what's another car that, again, they've been languishing around their MSRP price for years. There's a ton of exciting news around the brand today because I think their new car is sick, the new Bugatti. It's absolutely stunning. I think what they're doing is cool. They didn't do an electric car. They did a V16. But I think what's held Veyron prices back for so long is the service costs. Talk about McLaren SLR. Is that holding it back? Bugatti is actually going to be offering a cheaper tire option for Veyron owners. And they're going to be offering like a sort of a reimagination program. So you could send your Veyron back to the factory, get it refinished, get it redone. I don't care what anybody says. I think the Bugatti Veyron is the most important car of the 2000s. It's the most important hypercar ever made. It's the first $1 million car, first 1,000 horsepower car. There's not that many cars in the world today. I just think I'm a massive fan. I think 2025, if Bugatti releases a tire package, if they continue to support these cars, I think these cars have a massive future.
That one I can't disagree with. I think the reemergence of Bugatti in the 90s and what Roman Artioli did with the EB110, obviously that kind of set the tone for
Yes.
it. And then when Volkswagen bought them, they brought some technology and design in. I'm just as high as on the EB110. I think the EB110 has a great future, especially as people begin to embrace that part of its
Yes.
history. But yeah, the Veyron, again, that's another car that when it came out, it was groundbreaking, right? Like everyone's mouth was open. It's like, well, you hear the performance numbers, the design. Some people say it's polarizing. I don't think so. I think it ages incredibly well. It's a beautiful car.
Yeah, I think it aged incredibly well.
And you can't argue with what it brings for you for performance and value. So from personal experiences from us, we're seeing the Veyrons really take off and a lot of demand for them. I think the other thing that helps from the collectability aspect is they didn't make a whole lot of them.
Oh.
And even the sub variants, they got a little crazy with the sub variants, but you have 5, 10, 8 copies.
Very rare.
And now people are really starting to hunt for them, and they're becoming scarce. So I love the Veyron. Yeah.
What do you think, coming off of 2024, what do you think has been overpriced, or what do you think has gone up too quick, or what doesn't excite you?
I think an entire segment you're going to start to see a real correction is going to be your non-mark brands. Mm-hmm. And I'm not picking on anyone in particular here. I think companies like Rimac and Zenvo and Pininfarina and all these companies that invested into, even though the platforms are electric, you could say that might be a reason. But I just think that that segment is beginning to flood a little bit. And I think there was this like rush to buy all these cars and sell them out. And now you're starting to see people struggle in the second market. You're seeing unfilled orders, which is something that's new for the first time in a few years. So I think that there's a real overvaluation in an entire segment, which is these non-mark brands.
I mean, ITs, everyone I know that ordered an F80, and obviously it's not in the same category because Ferrari, I mean, you could argue that Ferrari is the strongest brand of all the exotic cars and hypercars. But I think anything today that has any hybrid technology, and I don't know if this is a rumor, I don't know if you saw Porsche, their new Mission E.
They're killing the electric platform.
They're killing the electric platform, which thank God.
That's a whole new argument because I disagree. So look, I think if you're going to have a powertrain, you want to keep internal combustion. I think the move to full electrification is a different person buyer world.
Yeah.
But when you hybridize or you're doing a hybrid drivetrain, to me it's progress. You're getting more power, more efficiency. You're still getting the experience of the internal combustion engine. So I think the pushback on the F80, it's unwarranted because let's even look at a car that's not like a hypercar, the 296.
Yeah.
It's a V6. People are like, it's only a V6, smaller displacement. But it's got 881 horsepower. And anyone that's driven that car says the best car I've ever driven. So I'm okay with hybrid as a means for progress, efficiency, and power, where I'm not okay with full electrification in the supercar world. So
I agree. I agree. I actually think I don't see the future. I don't think we're going to see manufacturers continue to produce these full electric cars at this level. For transportation, I think it's fine. Tesla, I'm a big fan of everything that Tesla's done. Everyone loves the cars. I won't own a Tesla, but everyone loves them. Everyone I know that has one loves it. But I think as these brands, I mean, I really commend Ford who said they're only going to be building these specialized vehicles now, like things like the Raptor or the Bronco. That's awesome. Like
Yeah.
I commend brands for doing that.
I think what was a little bit lost, and again, this more lends to what's hot in 25. I think what people don't realize is that they don't really. Everyone wants to go fast. Everyone wants to be the fastest.
Yeah.
But there's an experience attached to going fast. You want to hear an engine. I rented off of Turo a Plaid 1 year in Monterey.
Yeah.
And I got in, and it's so fast that your brain almost can't understand what's happening because there's no noise.
Yes.
And it's like dangerously fast. But after a couple of hours, I would take, a second less acceleration in 0 to 60, but to have the experience, to feel like I'm driving it, to smell it, to feel it. And you lose all of that with electrification. I know this conversation's kind of going off a rail a little bit about
totally.
electrification, but I think it's what's going to be hot. And I think 2025 should be the correction year where we go back to the basics, the purity, the 90s, 2000s, where you really feel and experience the cars you're driving. Yeah.
What else are you excited about for 2025?
And I guess great segue for the hybrid stuff. I think the 918s. I think a 918, again, while the LaFerrari has gone crazy and the P1 also left behind a little bit, I think being part of that holy trinity, being part of that kind of that new groundbreaking technology in 14, 15, where you had these hybrid battery cars, while there's a lot to fault on the battery stuff because there's newer technology and it could be a reliability issue, I think 918s were very important cars. I know what you're going to say, what was more important, so you could go ahead.
Listen, I love the 918.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool car. To me, I don't understand how today a 918 can bring more money than a Carrera GT when I think the Carrera GT is one of the best supercars of all time. Production numbers are almost identical. I think there's a few less 918s, but still the fact that they're bringing such a premium over a Carrera GT when a Carrera GT is... it sets the bar.
The other argument would be, well, they made a lot more Carrera GTs, but they didn't. They only made a few hundred more.
Correct. Which are probably wrecked because people didn't know how to drive them.
Yeah. Well, right. There's a lot less, right? It's hard to disagree with that, but I think you might be looking at some generational purchasing. I think guys that wanted a LaFerrari maybe a different guy than really loves a Carrera GT. I don't know. That's just kind of a guess, but the 918, if a LaFerrari is now firmly in the $4 million range, I think the 918 for that brand is every bit as important.
It's interesting. I never thought to really compare the two price wise.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah. It's apples to apples. There's just a lot less Ferraris, and there's obviously a little bit more brand loyalty, more so because I think they have to buy stuff. But there's more brand loyalty with Ferrari in that kind of realm of buying. Now, Porsche guys, I'm not saying Porsche guys aren't loyal; they're fiercely loyal. We have a huge show here this weekend for Porsche only, and it gets a huge draw. But I think a Porsche guy is like, look, I like old 911s. I don't care. I'm not buying a bunch of new 911s to get it. Whereas the Ferrari guys are firmly, follow the brand and very loyal to that brand and will buy pretty much anything that they make.
Pretty much anything that Ferrari makes, they will buy. No offense to Ferrari enthusiasts. A car that really intrigues me, and I even have put up ads, because you're going to laugh, I've never actually driven one, is a P1. And everyone I speak to, dear friend of mine in the Middle East, Faisal, has one. He said it's one of the greatest cars ever made. So I've been dying to get a P1 into inventory, share it with you guys.
And that's on one of my what's hot for 25 list. I think you're right. I think the P1,
and they're very rare, less than 300, right?
Less than 300 cars. Proven to be pretty reliable. McLaren's done a really good job supporting the battery kind of life cycle. They have a pretty fair program for refreshing the battery. So it becomes a little bit easier ownership, and you don't have to worry about, as the car gets older, some of these hybrid technologies can be problematic. I think P1s, again, they're kind of like in that 1.7 $2 million range. They
Yes.
should be well within the twos.
Yeah.
Based on a lot of factors. So I agree with you on that too. So we
Yeah,
don't disagree on a lot today.
and you know what? I would say, and I don't know if I think looking at the W1, which I think is such a miss from McLaren, like
Yeah.
a massive miss. I think the design is just, it's like, where did you?
Well, look, think about how you felt when the P1 came out. It was, again, the design was groundbreaking. It was like right up there with LaFerrari 918.
Yes.
And then McLaren develops this very like cousin-like look to everything, right? The whole line starts to look similar.
Yes.
And then you want to bring out your W1, which is supposed to be the P1 replacement, and it kind of looks like a 760
It's
all this stuff. And it's like, well,
and I
hold
get
on.
the technology is going to be incredible.
Yeah.
I know the stats are amazing, but I think for a brand like McLaren, who I'm a massive McLaren fan,
Yeah, of course.
I think for them, for this to be their new, flagship,
Yeah.
I don't see it from a design point.
Yeah.
I think a McLaren, like historically, they have captivated me. I think
They're amazing.
design
But-
language is great. I don't see.
And that kind of enters the discussion about you have to give credit to Ferrari for the F80. All right. Well, look, there's initially a lot of guys like, it's really, I don't know, it looks weird, and the black thing in the front. And I was out at Finale Mondiale, and they had one at Imola, and in person, there's a lot of things going on design-wise that are really impactful that you won't see on the pictures. But what my point is Ferrari, every time they do a flagship, they have a responsibility to make it something really impactful, something that a conversation starter. And I think they accomplished that with the F80.
I think, it's definitely a conversation starter. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't love the drivetrain, and I've made that very clear. I think they should have done a V12.
It won Le Mans.
I don't care. Like, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I think they should have done something, that's historic to their DNA. And yes, their supercars have always followed some sort of the F50, obviously, from the F1 car and things like that. But let's face it, I just think, V6 twin turbo, is the kiss of death for Jaguar. I mean, listen, with the XJ220.
Yeah, I think the difference is Ferrari didn't take a bunch of deposits and say, I'm going to give you a 12-cylinder making 1,000 horsepower.
Valid,
and then give you
valid point.
And then give you a V6.
Valid point.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have mixed emotions. I think it looks beautiful. I do think it looks great.
All right, so that's it. So for 25, F80 specifically, hot or not? You think it's going to be? How do you think?
I'd rather spend the $4 million plus on an F50 and call it a day.
Yes.
I think when you think of the price point, $4 million plus, there's going to be 1,000 cars by the time they're done. That's a lot of cars. I mean, go back to
it's a lot of cars. But that I think comes down to another discussion we could have at another time, which is what is the corporate influence doing to the collector car world? Is now
whole nother podcast coming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have balance sheet decisions, right?
Yeah.
Like we could probably sell out at $599, but we'll make $799 because it's way more profitable. But what does that do to the collector? But like I said, that's probably a whole nother discussion. But I think for me the F80. I think it was bold, and I think that's what we were expecting from McLaren. And to your point, maybe that kind of loops back to bringing some of the other Halo stuff back in. I think the other car on my list for 25 was kind of the reemergence of multiple collectors chasing F50s.
Yep.
We saw some pretty big numbers in 24, but there was like a little bit of this lull, right? Like you heard about 288s, they got hot, and Enzo's got super hot. LaFerraris went up. And then F50s, there was some good transactions, but not this like mass move. And now, from what we're experiencing, we have a lot of calls for F50s, and rightfully so. I think that's.
I agree.
There's not a whole lot of great cars that haven't transacted.
You know what we're also getting a lot of calls for, and we haven't had one in a while. Well, at least a couple months. We get one or two a year. Is Manuel Gallardos. I can't tell you how many people are interested in Manuel Gallardos, looking for Manuel Gallardos. I should say that correctly before I get roasted.
You're already done in the comments.
Yeah, and done in the comments. Thank you, guys. And what's wild is everybody is calling and asking for the cars. There's not a lot of cars.
Yeah.
I think these do have a big future. I think there is a younger generation that this was like their poster car. They are good cars. I know you had them for years.
Yeah, I was big on those cars for a while.
You know, I don't know how deep down a rabbit hole we'll get. I mean, I don't know. You know, it's definitely part of our DNA, but you know, I think for us, it's it's always a focus. I mean, you will see definitely in our inventory more 550 Barchettas, more 599 SA Apertas. Big fan. You know what recently intrigued me? And it was funny. I saw a massive number for an NSX. And I don't know if you saw it on Bring a Trailer. It was a really big, it was like $260,000, $270,000 or something. And it really intrigued me. I've always wanted to drive an NSX-R. And I know they're very rare.
Yeah.
They never came to the US. So I love cars that never came to the US, like a Diablo GT and certain cars. And I was like, you know what? What a cool car. Again, we're not experts in them. Sometimes stick to what you know, stick to what you know best. But I think these Japanese cars have a big future. Obviously, we're playing with LFAs a little bit. Incredible car, big following. It's probably the greatest Japanese car ever made, the LFA. But I actually am a big fan. I'm not the biggest like super guy. I'm not the biggest. You know, I think for me as a kid, I wanted an Integra Type R. You know, you're not gonna see those at Curated. You're not gonna, honestly, you probably won't see a Skyline. But an NSX-R, you know, Honda, early 90s, so involved in F1. If you've watched the Netflix Senna special, you know, I just am I think there's something there. I could be completely wrong, but.
No, I mean, look, little fun fact and secret. I used to love JDM when I was younger. Yeah, my
I did not know that.
I made my father buy a 3000 GT VR4.
I did know that, actually, yeah.
So, because I wanted it, but I was young. So, yeah, and you might not remember, when we first opened up, the first year, you specifically chased a couple of NSXs.
I did. We had two. Yeah.
And maybe the timing was okay. They were like kind of received, but they weren't.
We
easy
couldn't
to
sell it. I'm not even gonna lie. I chased some really nice NSXs. I was excited about the cars.
Visionary. You were a man 10 years ahead of your time.
That poor red car sat with us.
It was a great car.
Great car.
Yeah.
But
but no, I agree. It checks all the right boxes.
Yes.
It's and then when you saw what they did with the reemergence of the NSX was 2015 or 16 or 17. It was 17. I think that was just, again, it was like a corporate reimagining of a really great car.
Yeah.
So I agree on the NSX.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Even
though the first couple we bought scared us. But.
They completely scared us.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think we could go on and on forever. We talked about the Veyron. Another one, and actually, stay tuned. I'm going to be jumping over to Italy. You will as well, I believe.
I'll be there too. Yeah, we have some cool stuff we've been doing out there content-wise.
Very cool stuff.
Yeah.
You're working on a very, very cool big project.
Yep.
And we are going to go inspect 5 or 6 Countachs currently in restoration. Of that, 4 of them are actually LP400S low bodies. And I am just... It doesn't make sense why these cars are so cheap to me. I think they're art. I think they are the most important Countach from a launch point. You know, it's the first car with flares, but we have a ton of content coming up on those. I think, listen, these cars are going to be finished this year in restoration. I think 2025 is the year of the LP400S low body.
And you would know
I'm
this,
going to say it.
But the Series 1 400 is one of the lowest production Countachs.
Yes.
I mean?
Yeah,
50,
so there's
right?
50 cars. Mm-hmm. They have those early Bravo wheels. We'll get to see one of the coolest cars, actually the Frankfurt Auto Show car. We might get to see another one.
Working on a nice Series 1.
Another nice Series 1. They had unique gauges, different steering wheel. The wheels were tucked inside the front. The cars are super low. The roof is super low. That's actually a Series 2 on the screen now, but Sergio will put up a Series 1. But they're the most rare cars.
Yeah.
To me, they're the cars that sparked the interest, and then eventually Cannonball Run and the posters and all this. So I'm a huge nerd over those cars, and I still, to me, that is modern art.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And you know what? I think everyone identifies the anniversary or even the 5000 QV as kind of the poster car.
Yes.
But if you really have to line the cars up next to each other, I think I call it the hot rod.
Yeah, it is.
You know, the low
It
bodies
is.
are the hot rod
It's the
cars.
hot rod.
And
There's no question.
it almost looks like it went the other way around, right?
Yeah.
That should have been the later
Yes.
model one. So
Yes.
I also love the low body cars. I think they're really cool.
Yeah. So stay tuned. We have a ton of more content coming. Very, very excited to share that. And thank you again, my brother.
Thank you, buddy.
For an awesome update.
Yep.
And it sounds like we know what our next podcast will be.
Yeah, exactly. Take care, guys. Bye.